Martha Beck wrote a book many years ago called Finding Your Own North Star. I was really taken by that name. I just found this book a couple months ago, and as I began reading it, I thought, wow, we need this in the times we find ourselves in now. We need to find what she's talking about, because we're all fighting, whether it be in the world or we've come back from the pandemic and we're fighting over things that seem inconsequential. So I hope this will give some help in this time. She starts out talking about what the North Star is. The North Star is at the very north pole of the heavens, which means it doesn't move like the other stars do. It stays in place, and that is the star that mariners and explorers and the three wise men used to go in the correct direction that they needed to. And so this is all about, are we in the right direction right now? She says there are two ways that we show up. We show up as our essential self, and then we also show up as our social self. And when we're unhappy, angry, distraught, what's happened is we're out of balance. We no longer have a balance between our social self and our essential self. The social self is our learned part, and our essential self is where we came from the moment of birth. That essential self is made up of the genes, and I'd call it the stardust and the God stuff that are who we are. Children are the best example of the essential self, and I've always loved to watch children, to watch them play, to watch them interact, and try to remember what it was like to be 2, 3, 4 years old. That age, according to Don Miguel Ruiz in The Four Agreements, is an age when they are wild. And I kind of smile at that. That's wild like flowers and plants. However, just yesterday, we had Nancy June in the office. And at that age, falling into that age range, what a wonder to watch her in her totally what he would call undomesticated form, having fun, laughing, running. What happens? What has happened to us? Because what happens is as we move into school, as we move into society, we all of a sudden allow the social self to take too much control of us, and we forget about the child in us. Wanting, our essential self is always looking for joy and happiness and fun. And think to yourself, how often are you really feeling that in your life? How often are you feeling happy, joyful, joyous? Look at the children. One of my very favorite stories, and people who know me know this about me, is Peter Pan. Peter Pan has, yes, there are some psychological issues people will bring up about Peter Pan, but what I love about it when I first saw it was being reminded of not turning into a pirate. When Peter Pan was 7 days old, he was in his perambulator, and with his mother out in the park, and his mother's talking to a friend, and they're talking about what Peter's potential is. Maybe he can be a doctor, maybe he can be a lawyer. And it scared Peter, and he ran away. His perambulator goes down a hill, and it falls over, and the fairies find him, take him to Neverland, and that's where he grows up. His only real interaction with adults is with the pirates. And as I said, for me, the pirates represent what can happen to us as adults. What can happen to us when we forget that essential, playful, joyful place within us. And so I think we're at a time now where that's true. But there's another part to the story of Peter Pan, and it's the story in the movie Hook, if you've ever seen it. Robin Williams plays Peter Pan as a grown-up, because Peter Pan falls in love, gets married in this story, has children, and Captain Hook kidnaps the children and takes them back to Neverland. So Peter now has to go back. He is a lawyer in his life. He has to go back to Neverland, back to that place where he was free, laughing, running, playing, and he has forgotten everything. So these lost boys are trying to train him how to find his essential self again, how to find that playfulness, how to find that great joy that he had, and he just couldn't remember. And one little boy goes up to him, takes Peter by the face, looks into his eyes and says, "There you are, Peter." I love that story because for each one of us, if somebody could just come to us and say, "There you are. There is that essential piece of you, that part of you that is always there, but just sometimes gets lost or gets out of balance." Somehow or other, we've got to find a way to be able to balance the social. The social's important because we have responsibilities. There are things we need to do in life, but we've got to balance it. Our hearts and minds are desiring fun and joy in the midst of responsibilities. Beck tells a story about a man whose family had been raised during the Depression. And that was a time when people were worrying about money, eating, living. And so he picked up a lot of that energy, and as he became an adult, he worked and worked and worked and worked, made lots of money, but he was poor because he couldn't stop working, because he had in the back of his mind from that social self what he had learned. His parents die. He begins to talk with Beck about what's going on with him and that he's not really happy in his work. And so she suggests that he write down the very positive things that have been said about him in his life. So he thinks about his professors, his clients, the people that he worked with, his wife, even his children, and know that his children really didn't know their dad because he was working so hard. And he all of a sudden decided he'd take a day off and spend it with his children. But remember, I told you his parents had died. He was haunted by his parents for taking a day off. And so he went back and he worked harder and harder and harder, and finally he said, "I cannot do this." And he pulled out all of those great things that were said about him, reminding him of his essential self. And he quit his job. And he spent time with his children. Because he had plenty of money, he spent time with his children finally. And as they got older, he decided he'd go back to work for himself, and he'd work for joy. So what I want to say to all of us, including myself, find your essential self. Recognize those two pieces of you. Recognize that they're there, but find a way. Maybe it's looking at, what have people said about me? What do I know about myself? We're going to talk further about the actual actions you can take when you recognize that you're out of balance between yourself and your essential self. Thank you.
Just simply breathe into and recognize in this present moment, in this space, with the breath, that one life and that one source and that one divine energy that is continuously unfolding and manifesting, changing and evolving, and expressing itself through everything. It is love, it is light, it is life itself. It is wisdom, intelligence, caring and kind energy, all things good and all energy beneficial. And I recognize that energy exists and operates within me, and it exists and operates within all of humanity, all of society, and all of creation, connecting us all and unifying us all, bringing us together in one source and in one life. And it is in understanding this connection, knowing that it is real, it is the truth of who and what we all are, I know I can speak my word on behalf of all of us as humanity and as society, and know that there is an effect, that there is a response within us. So I just simply affirm that each of us, we move through our lives, we move through our interactions, and we approach our interactions with an energy of understanding, an energy of acceptance, an energy of compassion. We begin to shift and move away from divisive thinking, polarization, and we shift towards understanding, acceptance, and sacred curiosity of one another. And I simply know and affirm that as each of us begins to do this individually, it ripples out into our homes, it ripples out into our communities, and it ripples out into our schools, our governments, and ultimately into society. And as more of us begin to shift, as more of us begin to embody this energy of acceptance and love within us, and we bring it forth in our interactions, change begins to occur in our society. And peace and acceptance and understanding and compassion become the norm of our daily lives. So I just give great thanks for this. I express my gratitude for the changes that are occurring here and now as we wake up to the truth of who we are. I give thanks for the blessings that show up in our lives and that begin to emanate from us and ripple out into the world. And I give thanks for the peace and the acceptance and the understanding that becomes the norm in our society. So I release these words into law. I release them into divine action with the power of my faith and my belief and my conviction behind them, knowing that the law is working on behalf of this prayer to bring this manifest for all of us. And so it is.